We are just you know, a little bit ahead of schedule, which is always good. And we can, I think, have the flexibility to move right into the plenary discussions about integrated technologies for SNAC. If folks want to have or present questions or comments based on really anything that's happened today or even yesterday, we can move into that phase of the conference.
Yeah, if I may, I'd like to say a word or two about. It was Faith Charlton who came up with the umbrella. Was it integration technologies, or and then more broadly just integration. So, in many respects, what we were after today, well, it's not just integration, but also being inclusive. But the integration aspect of it is with Open Refine plus SNAC. The objective there is to enable people, institutions, and the people that populate those institutions to push large amounts of data into SNAC as efficiently as possible. And much along the lines that when we initially built SNAC in research and development, Open Refine in some ways encapsulates all of the things that we did, but is an attempt to engage those contributing as partners on that project. So that's one form of integration. The second form of integration was with Archive Space plus SNAC, and a large number of the SNAC community are Archive Space users. And one of the critical things that we wanted to overcome was duplicated work, which is to say, you describe someone over here in Archive Space, and then you have to go over and describe them in SNAC if you're going to participate in both of those. And so what we wanted to do was lower the bars so that Archive Space users could benefit from the data in SNAC by pulling it, but also contribute to SNAC by pushing data into SNAC and to make it part of their daily activity. So that was the integration that we had in mind there. And then finally, with the light SNAC, that's, while there are technical pieces behind it, that's more of a community building ethical drive on the part of SNAC, which is wanting to be inclusive and to lower the bar to make it possible for projects and archives that are small or under-resourced to be able to participate, in not having to have, sort of high levels of expert staff to do so. So that would be my overall framing of a discussion. And we'd love to hear from someone besides ourselves.
Daniel, can we unmute and just start talking, or should we use chat?
If it gets out of control by unmute talking, then we'll go back to chat. But otherwise, people can unmute and talk.
Well, one thing, just really quickly, I wanted to note, like yesterday, we would like to try and use progressive stacking. So if folks are putting questions in the chat, if you want to self-identify as a member of an underrepresented community, you can use an asterisk along with your question, and those questions will be prioritized So I just wanted to remind folks of that. And just really quickly, I may have somehow missed it, but Susan, did you share the results of the third poll? Oh, I just saw you.
I did not, because I did not want it to pop up over Gina's presentation. That seemed exceptionally rude, particularly since her presentation was so fascinating, but I would happily share them now. So there you go. And it is a pleasure to see at least more than 50% of people are using SNAC for research. I think that's just a great thing. And I am keeping this information for us to think more about as we, for the operations committee. So thank you all who participated in both yesterday's and today's polls. Much appreciated.
Yeah, I actually have a question too, kind of following up on what you were saying, Daniel, kind of an overarching question. Maybe it's a two-parter for attendees, but so SNAC has been significantly focusing on developing these tools and resources to make contributing to SNAC more scalable for institutions. And even though the tools that were discussed today are relatively new and still need testing, like the presenters mentioned, and user feedback and different use cases, and continuing to develop these tools, and also at the same time, folks need to start implementing these tools to determine how helpful they are. I know we got some positive feedback in the chat, but I'm kind of wondering what folks' initial thoughts are about whether they think these tools will lessen the barriers to entry to contributing to SNAC. And I also wonder, as a corollary, if there are other barriers to contributing to SNAC that were not addressed in the presentations today. So I'll throw that out there if anyone wants to respond.
I can answer that. I think that these tools, especially the Open Refine tool and the ArchivesSpace plugin, are great, and I'm definitely going to see how we can use them at my institution. But I'm at NYU, and we're pretty well resourced, and we have pretty sophisticated systems in place. Anyway, I know at my previous job where I was the ArchivesSpace person and I didn't really have any other help, I don't think I would have been able to install and plug in. That was just kind of beyond me. But the light SNAC, I think, is definitely lowering barriers to entry, even if it doesn't make it necessarily faster.
Others just like to chime in. I thought Faith's question, well, it's like, here's what we're doing. Do you think that's really going to help? And what aren't we doing that you think would help? Is that a fair rephrasing in blunt terms?
That was much more concise.
Yeah. Well, only because you clearly articulated to begin with. Reduction, making it concise comes as a separate step.
I have kind of a question in regards to using the plugin, the ASpace plugin. I don't work with ASpace myself, but our special collections staff do. And we had a little project this past spring to start creating a group of records in SNAC for a specific body of material. And I hope that we'll be able to continue and perhaps push the data directly from a space using that plugin. But I have a question. I guess a question in terms of the specifics of how that data is being mapped from a space to SNAC when you push it. Has there been any studies done on when you're putting data into a space, how it actually gets mapped into SNAC? I mean, I saw what Joseph did in terms of, you know, lining up types of data from one form to the other, but is there anything that might get put in a place in a space that would get lost somehow, or get put in an area of SNAC that we don't necessarily want it to be put into? I don't know if that.
I think the functionality is such that that's not going to happen, because it really focuses on two categories and two categories only. Using the old expression, devil's in the details, it's really not so much category mismatches or being in the wrong place as it would be at more detailed levels of the information that goes back and forth. And that kind of mapping is a bit of a challenge. And so you want to ameliorate, you know, you want overall for everything to work towards the greater good, doing as little bad as possible. And a critical piece of that, which was not emphasized but was implicit in both the open refine as well as archive space, is the identity resolution, which is making sure that if you're, you know, is this entity I'm dealing, it's like, you know, square one authority control. Is this person that I am looking at already in SNAC or not? And so you want to make sure that that becomes a part of it and not overlook that. But as I've often said, you know, duplicates are not the worst thing in the world. I mean, making a mistake and confusing two people and thinking that they're the same person is far worse in my mind. But duplicates don't really bother me. Well, they do, but not so much that I don't want to empower people to be able to push data in.
So does that mean that maybe we're going to need to have, I don't know, not a refresher course, but maybe some kind of reiteration to people that are SNAC editors that are using a space, that they should follow a process of doing some kind of thorough search beforehand for all, you know, possible variants with the names that they're going to be.
Yes, well, you know, when you create a new entity in SNAC, before you can even get beyond, you enter a name in, and then it pushes back on you and say, "You sure it's not one of these?" And you know, we could possibly build that functionality onto the archive space side. So when they go to push it, you would have to confirm that, yes, this is not the same as that. This is a new one.
Right. I think that might be a good idea, or at least something to think about once we see how people who are using this, what they run into in terms of issues. It may not become an issue. You know, they may be smart enough and thorough enough that that we don't have that problem. That's all. But thanks. That's great. I look forward to propagandizing for this.
Thanks. Yeah. Call you St. Paul, even though that's not your name. Anyone else? Worthy brings up that there is a document that specifies the mapping between archive space and SNAC. And yes, we did consult with that, but it was also a map. Well, it's one thing to map something like that in the abstract, and it's another sit down when you really get down to it. You start seeing things that people didn't see when they started doing it. But
yes, I can understand that. I part of the point was that it's for the ASpace plugin, those fields, that mapping is established by the plugin, unlike the open refine part where you pulled different column labels over and match them up manually. So yeah, so it's a bit more already fixed in the ASpace, and according to the extensive amount of work that's done before and while you're implementing. So it's been thought through a good bit, right?
Yeah, I think the real risks here are not so much on data, but the risks have always been and continue to be identity resolution, and identity's such a slippery thing. Is are these two people with similar names the same person or different persons? And it's a tricky thing for humans in terms of just navigating that, and then the algorithms that are used are only as good as the people that put the data in to begin with. So Dean Rayber at Michigan State makes the observation that a person is only a series of events. Would you like to elaborate on that, Dean?
No, I spend too many hours talking with folks about that.
Yeah.
But I mean, in one sense, obviously that's one of the things as archivists that we do. We only have a series of records that give us the person, and so that's the best we can do in terms of recreating that person.
Yeah, well, we're formulating identities based on the available evidence, which might be a lot of evidence or very little evidence or conflicting evidence.
Yes, but the evidence is only a record and the record is only an event.
Yeah. Agreed.
Okay, I'll leave it alone. I've gone around that block too many times.
We had an additional question from Barbara Teitzinger about unmerging.
Yeah, this is one of those things that we've actually had under development for a long time, but it's gotten sort of pushed to the side over and over again. And in part because it's really complex, which is why once you merge two entities together, pulling them back apart is an assertion by assertion. If you combine all of the assertions about two entities into one, you have to sift through those assertions to figure out which ones go with which. And so we've thought about that, but Joseph and I haven't discussed it in a long while because we've been focused on so many other things. But it needs to be done, but it's not. Ultimately, it still becomes a human intellectual sifting process.
Yeah, we've looked at ways in which we could develop tools that would help you batch and sort of pull apart two intertwined identities, but it's pretty much a manual process for the most part. It's not something that can really be done in large batches or very fast. Just sort of have to research, kind of follow the trails and figure out who's who. And it frequently, when two people have been merged who should not have been, it's because they have an exact name match or other similar relationships that just makes it, one level harder.
I've seen other databases, not archive databases, but just databases in general, that preserve a historic record of the original record, a historic recording of the original database records that facilitate that unmerging. I'm not a database specialist or a database programmer. I just know that I've seen databases that use that method. Is that anything that you could do in this? I don't know what the structure is behind SNAC, so.
We keep a complete trail. So when you're looking at something in SNAC, you're looking at the latest set of assertions about an entity. And so there's the potential there to be able to back up, but developing that sort of unmerge is a non-trivial piece of development, and we just haven't focused on it.
Thank you.
Yes. What we focus on is warning people about are you sure those are the same person before you hit merge? I mean, merge is a very dangerous operation. Other comments, thoughts?
Is the assertion of definitely not same still allowable for the CPF records?
Yeah, it is still a feature of the editing interface, so that if you see two entities that might be the same, but they're not, because of the evidence, you can declare them, you can affirmatively say they're not the same. Mark authorities for years had a little note in there that said, do not confuse this with.
Right. Save a lot of redoing the research, right? If you do it. So
yeah, well, the funny thing is in the overall buildup of SNAC, at some point I discovered some description in there that had exactly that note inside of a description where the two had algorithmically been merged. So
ain't that a fun, huh?
Yeah. Now, when I've done unpacking of merged ones, I mean, some of them are not too bad, but I had a very common, this is a very common Scottish name, and like something like 17 different individuals got collapsed under one description. And the way I unraveled that was I had Joseph help me by going back in, and we looked at all the source information that led to that collision. And then I could pick it apart. But it was an arduous task. It took me, a couple of days.
So talking about merging makes me think of my non-work hobby, sort of. It's sort of related to work, which is genealogy. There's a lot of shared names there. And how I've ended up handling that, especially on a system like Family Search, which has like millions of users, and any one of them could go in there and ruin one of your ancestors' pedigree, so to speak. They have a built-in notification system, so you can watch key people, and then you'll be notified if there's changes. And I wonder if that could be part of a solution, like as a holding repository, you get notifications to certain changes made to, I don't know, related records, or they're linked to your resources. That might help monitor changes.
Yeah, that could be quite daunting. I'm thinking of say the Houghton Library, which I think has the most CPF entities in SNAC related to its holdings. And if we were to generate, say, a monthly report every time one of those does something, I don't know. What do you think, Susan? Would you want your staff sifting through that? And
we got enough reports to sift through now.
Yeah.
No, because we just, I think we are not only we're quite big, and there's just such a huge amount. If you have at the records, we don't care.
Yeah.
Perhaps for an opt-in notification system, something along the lines of if there's a particular resource description of interest or frequently edited, something that someone wants to follow, or even just saving your favorites into a single place so that you can have them for review and follow them if they've been merged or updated or better described in the future. But yeah, it'd be interesting to look into.
Nancy Kennedy makes the observation that about not wanting a bulk report, but being able to watch a specific entity when they're locked, to be notified when they're not locked. I'm sure you could do that in your sleep, Joseph.
It could be done. Maybe not in my sleep, but might not be as bad as it sounds.
Yeah.
Is there a way to code the mergers, one or the other, so that you can see what was merged and it stays with the record?
Yeah, you can do that. You can go into a detailed history and see, what was merged. And I believe, Joseph, you can back up and see earlier versions.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Is that true of a merge, that you can back up and see, say, 2 earlier versions?
Yes, you will have to, click back to see the sources and the revision history, but you can follow back and see earlier versions pre-merge.
Yeah.
So then are you able to just click back and get both sides again, the unmerged?
Yeah.
Going back in time?
Yeah, it was what I was saying, Bernita, before is we have the data in there to be able to say unmerge based on these, back up to these 2 previous descriptions. It's just that, that's a fair amount of development to create that, and it's something that we haven't focused on.
Is it possible to do what some programs do and have a saved copy of each before you merge?
Well, in essence, we have that, but it's not quite exactly that. But we can reproduce for you what was there. And because we could do that, we do have the potential to back out. What one has to understand is the complexity of it. A lot of it has to do with all of the relations and adjusting all of the relations. So if you've gone, if you've merged 2 entities that have each of them 1,000 relations with other things in SNAC, you have to be able to go out and undo all those as well. And so it gets quite complex. In some respects, I think what we've done is really, with respect to the versioning and the transaction tracking, is really very good. It's very smart on one hand. On the other hand, it might have been much better and less costly to do something like what you described, which is what Wikidata does, which is they just, take a snapshot of what's there and save it, so that backing up merely is recovering the snapshot. But it's more complicated than SNAC. And it also, the way that we've done it, makes development of certain things more difficult as well. So, it's Bruce Washburn at OCLC used an expression that I really like. You encounter developer's remorse. That so you decided to do it this way, and then 5 years later you think, yeah, maybe we shouldn't have done it that way. Any other discussion?
I like the light snack, and I was just wondering how much is eliminated from the more detailed snack. Is there any way to understand a little bit of how much is being taken out?
Yeah, I don't have a ready answer for that, but we could go back to it. One of the things that it passed fairly quickly when Joseph was doing it, but there's sort of a base set of information that you're prompted for, and then you have an option if you want to be more detailed, it'll prompt you for more information, but you have the option. You're not overwhelmed with that to begin with, and what's there or not there is something that could be negotiated over time. So if there are things in the basic description that are missing, but we develop a consensus that they ought to be there, they could be added, and the same would go for the detailed. So in other words, it could be quite progressive, and depending upon how much information and how motivated you are, we could make light snack allow you to make pretty much a full description if you want. But we're trying to lean away from that based on the view that the more detailed and in-depth you get, the more complicated it gets, and the more work someone has to do, and that ultimately you're going to get less description rather than more doing that.
Daniel, can I chime in? I just want to share that we based it, Benita, on the minimal and optimal guidelines that the editorial policy and standards working group created, and that is on the SNAC website. So we use those as a guideline of what to include. So a person only has to put in the minimal amount of information of description for the entity, and then the light snack can go up to the optimal amount, which is still a fairly basic record, but we based it on those two standards.
Thank you.
The light part is really the interface, right? The record is a full. The information is put into a full normal SNAC record. So the option, once you've done it via the simple the light interface, you can still come back through the full interface and add any information to any of those records entered that way. So it's not, it hasn't changed the structure of the records. It just is changing the way the interface works. Right?
Yeah, but the input forms, we've tried to design them in a progressive way, which by that I mean that they ask for a minimum, what we considered really, the really important core data in order to be functional in SNAC. And then, but they have the option of in particular the CPF entities, they have the option of saying, I'd like to say a bit more than the minimal functional. I want to say more. But we're not requiring it, and we're not throwing it in their face. We're trying to keep the basic information needed to be basic. Okay. Any more? My sense is we're well, at least I'm getting tired. Maybe I'm projecting, but I'm also look at the number of participants, and it begins to drop. But are there other things that people want to discuss? And if not, I'll go into closing remarks while we still have people participating.
I think that's good, Daniel. We got about 15 or 16 more minutes to go before the official end time, so take it away.